When we think of God, when we think of Jesus, the number one emotion that we usually think of is love. And love certainly is the primary emotion for God. However, it's not the only one. God shows us a full range of emotions in his words and in his actions. And in this episode, I'm going to share some thoughts on one of his emotions, and that's anger. So let's get started. For many men, anger is a primary emotion. It's one we have to work to control and contain so that it doesn't lead us to making bad decisions. Anger can lead us to hurting others and ourselves very quickly. One momentary outburst of anger could have lifelong ramifications. On the other hand, anger is not automatically a negative. Righteous anger has moved men to take action and solve challenges for as long as men have been around on earth. And for God, righteous anger is certainly one of the emotions he shows us throughout the Bible. Right now, we'll focus on what might be the most well-known example of the anger of Jesus in the Bible. And that's what happened when he went to the temple and he saw what the money changers were doing there. To understand this, we need to have some context and some background for the story. It was not easy for people to bring a sacrifice from a long distance to the temple. Bringing livestock, for example, over many miles could result in the animal being stolen or dying on the journey. And because of this, a system was set up to allow for the changing of currency or purchasing of sacrifices when a person arrived at the temple. And because payments could not be made in foreign currencies, like the Roman denarii, which had pagan symbols or images of the emperors on it, money had to be exchanged for appropriate currency to use within the temple. The result of this is that the temple itself became something like a currency exchange or a bank. The entire process was clearly detestable to Jesus when he saw it, and he became visibly angry. We read about this in John 2:13 through 16. It was nearly time for the Jewish Passover celebration, so Jesus went to Jerusalem. In the temple area, he saw merchants selling cattle, sheep, and doves for sacrifices. He also saw dealers at tables exchanging foreign money. Jesus made a whip from some ropes, and he chased them all out of the temple. He drove out the sheep and cattle, scattered the money changers' coins over the floor, and turned over their tables. Then, going over to the people who sold doves, he told them, "Get these things out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a marketplace." The way that Jesus acted in this situation is a problem for many who cannot think of a loving Jesus being angry. But we must remember that a spineless love, a love with no real weight behind it, that's not really love at all. Love requires action. It could even be stated that love is one side of a coin and that God's anger or wrath is the other side of that same coin. A coin doesn't exist without both sides. In modern times, in too many churches, discussing God's anger or wrath, it isn't really discussed at all. It doesn't happen very often. And when we consider God's wrath, there are several important elements that we need to keep in mind. First, God's wrath is just. His wrath is never self-indulgent traits like human anger is. His anger is righteous and a necessary reaction to a moral evil or a sinful action. You can read about that in verses like Romans 2:5. Second, God's wrath is consistent. Sometimes people will think of the Old Testament God as he's the one who's filled with wrath and anger and harshness, but the God of the New Testament, he's just kind and loving. However, in both the Old and New Testaments, we find descriptions of the wrath of God. He is the same. So, for example, Jeremiah 30:23 in Old Testament and Romans 1:18 in the New. Third, God's wrath is justified in Christ. Ultimately, we know the good news that Christ has come into the world to save sinners, like in 1 Timothy 1:15. And in Jesus, we know that God has demonstrated his righteousness and created a path for sinners to be redeemed. Lastly, when we think of Jesus and the times he got angry, it's important to notice that he didn't get angry about the injustices done to him personally. Rather, his anger was most often reserved for religious teachers leading people in the wrong direction, for religious phonies, and for man-made rules being added between people and God for selfish gain. That was the kind of thing that Jesus most often was angry and upset about. And always remember that while Jesus did get angry at people's actions and behaviors, he never stopped loving them. If there is something in your life that you think God might be getting upset about, know that no matter what that is, he still loves you, and he's waiting for you with open arms. Before you go, be sure to subscribe to this show wherever you listen to your podcasts, or subscribe to this and watch this on YouTube. Wherever you watch, wherever you listen, be sure to subscribe. Give it a thumbs up, give it a like, leave a comment, leave a review. Those things really help other people to find the show, so thank you for that. And head over to significantman.com and sign up for the Intel email series. It's a quick email that you'll get once a week, sometimes inspiration, sometimes devotion, sometimes for you to just think about as you go during the week. It's free, it's fast, it's simple. Head over to significantman.com and sign up for Intel today. All right, enjoy the next show.